I have to admit, I feel a bit like Mr. Incredible in The Incredibles at the idea that his son's moving from the 4th grade to the 5th grade is a graduation in their announcement of this being a half-season finale. There is a certain marketing strategy there I have to respect. Instead of just dropping people off into rerun season without any warning, they're actually making it an event and making it a big episode. So from that standpoint, I can respect the marketing of it. It's still kind of irritating. That said, I thought, on the whole, the first 7 episodes were something of an improvement over what I thought was a rather mangy first season. A number of things I'm noticing right off the bat have not changed are some of the treatment of the female characters. One of my biggest issues with the first season was that I thought that its female characters got a terrible shake. They were all pretty much motivated by self-interest or fear, or all they did was react to things that happened, or be there for male characters to react to. An exception notably would have been Andrea, was placed in a protective role of her sister, who was very much in the former category, but then any progress she made was immediately erased when she decided that the best move for her would be to stay inside of an exploding building in the finale of the first season. Easily the worst episode of the series so far. The CDC storyline, which went nowhere, did nothing, and only served to show that Andrea now really wants to die and has given up, which is an interesting journey, considering the fact the first thing we see her do in the series is point a gun at Rick and start telling him how it's going to be. For her to actually go from that point to, I don't want to live this life anymore, was very disappointing for me, and I thought a terrible, terrible move, and it was only there to give her and Dale a scene together so Dale could drag her out. And into the second season, that's exactly where those two are, and she is still mad at him for dragging her kicking and screaming away from fiery suicide. And that's pretty much where we join the series. The team is scavenging cars on a highway. This actually gives us an interesting opportunity to show the group's dynamic with Rick's wife, Lori. Lori, who in the first season seemed to be motivated exclusively by self-interest, fear, and need for approval, seems to now add cowardice and a lack of perspective. There's a very interesting scene on the highway where they're starting to loot cars, and Lori gets up and she makes a very firm assertion that they should not be looting these cars. This is a graveyard. It should be treated with respect. All the characters pretty much look at her for another 2 seconds and then go right back to looting and making plans for more effective looting. I am very amused by this. I think this is an excellent example of the fact that the rest of the cast actually has the same opinion of this woman as I know I do, that she is cowardly, rather unintelligent, and motivated not by any sort of logic that would be recognized on planet Earth. This is an opinion that will only be deepened for me over the course of the next couple episodes as Lori goes from panicky, cowardly to eventually a rather loathsome level of pessimism when later on in the series she'll actually assert that she wishes Carl was dead because he wouldn't have to put up with this, much to Rick's chagrin. You really have to wonder where Rick is thinking this relationship is headed at this point, where his wife is actively wishing for their son to die. This, of course, takes place after Carl is shot accidentally by Otis, the genius farmhand. Of course, getting Carl to help and then getting help to Carl and getting him the requisite medical attention and medical supplies will form a big part of the storyline in the first 3 episodes, which is running parallel to the main story of the little girl lost, Sophia, who runs off, and Rick loses her pretty much, and Rick has all this guilt, and the big storyline is them looking for Sophia. And I have to say, when I first saw this, my gut instinct was that this was just more time-wasting BS to give us even more time with the even more BS-y BS of the relationship of Lori and Rick and Shane, the angry idiot cop, misogynist. Did I mention he's also a misogynist? Very firmly established in the first season, in case you missed that. Hates women, doesn't like them, mainly because they don't turn off lights when they leave rooms. It's an interesting perspective on misogyny, in my opinion. So Shane, our troubled foil for Rick, actually does get the chance to be a foil for Rick and not just do horrible things when he's not around. Because what happens is Rick wants to stay and look for the missing girl, and Shane wants to take off. Shane thinks it's stupid to look for a missing girl. This starts bubbling to the surface around episode 4, 5, 6, and it finally provides a little drama between Rick and his former friend Shane. Shane, who has only been there to do horrible things to the rest of the cast when Rick is not looking, and then be the beneficiary of the rest of the cast's remarkable politeness about it. He's pretty much been the group's boogeyman, beating people to death and being a general jerk to everyone when Rick is off saving someone or just not paying attention. So I'm really glad to see Rick and Shane actually having some screen time together and actually having a disagreement. This, of course, all builds toward the end of the series, the first half of the second season, where it's discovered that the little girl is actually, well, she's dead. And then Rick, of course, being the one who lost her in the first place, has to put her down by shooting her in the head. Now, the fact that he shoots her in the head is an interesting parallel to the fact that we are bludgeoned over the head with the plot points that Shane doesn't think that Rick has it in him to make the big decisions. And that's something he has been hammering over and over again over the past couple episodes, in the way most plot points get hammered into our heads in The Walking Dead. I'm better than Rick. Rick's not tough enough. Rick can't make the big decision, so of course Rick has to make the big decision. That's about how plot works on The Walking Dead. There's really no such thing as subtlety on this show. Now, I applaud it because it's actually something happening, and not just our characters milling around and debating about who's boyfriend and who's girlfriend, and who's sadder, generally speaking, which is what the entire first season was made up of. It was high school. I'm not going out with you anymore. I'm going out with him. He's my boyfriend. He's my best friend. I'm your best friend. You don't like me. Blah, blah, blah. That was my issue with the first season, and that's basically my summary of the first season. That, and then a guy gets his hand cut off, and he runs off, and then Rick does some other stuff with some guys who we never see again. That's basically my summary of the first season. On the topic of female characters, the second season does serve to introduce Maggie, who is, in my opinion, by far and away the most likable female character, which is saying something because she's really she's pretty standard as these things go, but she, to date in the series, is the only one whose actions are only somewhat governed as a reaction to a male character's actions. She is mainly there as a foil for her father, Herschel, who owns the farm, which plays the setting for the majority of the season. Funny story. Rocker Ann Carlisle was originally offered the role of Gozer in the original Ghostbusters movie, but she turned down the role, and the reason she cited was that all of the female characters were just there to be had. Maggie actually shows that she is an independent person by being had by Glenn, by basically saying, look, I will have sex with you because I can and because I feel like it. Doing this, she's basically the only character who says what they want, does it, and doesn't feel bad about it. So, bravo, Maggie. You are a character who can actually articulate needs, take what you want, and not agonize over it. So, bravo, Maggie. You're my favorite character of the new season. Visually, the second season suffers from some of the quibbles I had with the first season. This is as good as any time to bring up George Romero, because I think his zombies serve as the best visual counterpoint to the zombies in the Walking Dead series. George's zombies have always been a little too heavy on the character. They've definitely erred toward being too colorful, so to speak, and that actually is... I do choose that term for a reason, because the zombies in Walking Dead have an intentional monochromatic look to them. They are, by and large, a single undifferentiated blue-gray mass. If you look at them, they're all sort of that same drab, gray, mud-splattered. In night shots, they are all shot with that same blue filter, so they all kind of blend together, giving them that herd look. And I don't just say that to emphasize the herd that we see in the first episode of Season 2, which was done very well, but again suffers from the zombies looking like they are their own species. They don't look like zombified humans. They look like an other. They look like a species that is zombie, whereas George Romero, in his movies, always really went out of his way to differentiate the zombies and have work attire or weird outfits or colorful. If a zombie is a hero zombie, as they're called, the ones you see up close, they tend to have very distinctive looks to them, and they do that in Walking Dead, but they're all, again, very monochromatic. They've all been out in the sun way too long. They've all been in the rain too long. They're all kind of undifferentiated, and there's a reality to that, but there's sort of a added reality of having them be in costumes. You see a bit of that. You see a bit of both halves of this in the scene at the high school. Now, at the high school, they're shooting it, obviously, at night for a night shot, so they're using a blue-gray filter to neutralize everything and make it look like night, but at the same time, nothing stands out. The zombies are all kind of flat, and what I'd like to see is a little bit more interest, a little more color, honestly. I'm not asking for the band uniform, and fans of Day of the Dead will know what I'm talking about. That movie, suffering from going too far on the work uniform look, where a marching band member is actually clearly seen in the crowd, or the clown from Diary of the Dead. Less said about that movie, the better, believe you me, if you haven't seen it. So, overall, I would like to see a little bit more of the zombies as former people and not just ravaging monsters. I think in the second season, the first season, there actually was some emphasis on the sadness of the zombies. They really looked downtrodden and unhappy. They looked sad. They looked like haunted souls. They really played that up in a lot of the... If you see the very sort of Annie Leibovitz-style portraiture you saw in the promotional material for the first season, they had that very sad, big-eyed look, most typified by the bike zombie, the one on the ground that he has to shoot. Of course, he had to walk. He had to pretty much go on a nature hike to find her, so he really had to go out of his way. So there was a weird moment there where he's actually hiking through the woods to find this sad thing he feels so bad for to shoot it in the head. So I don't know, I thought having him be so far away from the road was a weird moment, because it's, this is a chore too, was really what I saw him doing there. But on the whole, I would say season 2, first half, on the whole, better. I would like to see more three-dimensionality in a lot of the characters. I'd like to see more three-dimensionality in the zombies. There is a lot of promise of that. Of course, everyone I'm sure is talking about the barn sequence. That was a lot of fun. Rick, obviously, the good leader emerging. Shane making his move as the bad leader. And we're finally getting back to some of that Joseph Campbell business where Rick actually will have to undergo some trials to prove that he is the good leader for this group. That's what I want to see that, and that was a big thing that was missing in the first season, is he just shows up and everyone says, well, that's the leader, he's the guy. And there's really no reason for them to say that, because they've already got a guy in a cowboy outfit and a badge saying he's the leader. And the other cowboy hat guy says, hey, okay, no, that's the leader. And there's really no reason for Shane to step aside except for the fact that he's kind of a jerk who wants power but not responsibility. And he sees Rick as a good person to take the responsibility. And he doesn't necessarily have to give up the power because, well, he's a giant asshole and he's got a gun. And that's really all you need to have power in especially a post-apocalyptic world where there's a post-law world. He's the law because he's bigger. And that is something that comes out in his character in Season 2 also, which I enjoyed. I'm definitely looking more forward to Season 2.5 than I was to Season 2 after Season 1. I thought Season 1 was a big disappointment. I thought Season 2 was a slight uptick, so I'm looking forward to being further proven wrong when I originally assessed this show as a rather poor, hastily assembled Lost knockoff with zombies. So, better than Season 1, not by as much as I'd hoped. Still looking forward to Season 2. Season 2, second half.